Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to VTOLBR, and welcome to this episode. It's going to be a slightly different one because we're not flying a mission. We're doing a bit of a research. I was always curious, how exactly do the stealth parameters on the F45A work? We know some of the constants, some of the variables. We know about potentially radar helping your detection. We know about removing external hardpoints, flying in the stealth mode. We know about flying at different altitudes. So the stealth is all about the materials and the shape of an airplane and its ability and effectiveness to deflect the radar signals and make yourself practically invisible to the radar. It doesn't make the airplane invisible, it just makes it less detectable. So from what I've researched on the internet through the different forums or Discord channel, what I learned about the stealth is that it definitely there is definitely something to do with how you approach the target, whether you are approaching head-on, and this cross-section should be the most effective in terms of avoiding radar. But also there is a lot to do with the altitude and if you have the external hardpoints or not. So in this particular test, I'm going to select, I'm going to be using this map, which is called the counter bomber. So that's the mission. In this map, we are taking off from the aircraft carrier and we are heading towards the radar, which we have identified or picked up here. So we have it here. It is about 65 kilometers away from us. There's a small town just here to the east of it. So there is one radar dish, and there are a number of launchers around it, and a number of launchers around the airport, which is just in the vicinity. So what I'm going to be doing this time is I'm going to be approaching this radar using different altitudes. So I'm going to be testing 10,000, 7,500, 5,000, 2,500, and 500 meters, just to see how those different altitudes affect the stealth capability. But also I'm going to be flying directly towards it, and I'm going to be flying to the side of it, leaving it to my 9 o'clock, just to see how that affects it. Furthermore, I'm going to be using, in both of these cases, I'm going to be using the radar off and on, and we're going to be using the same approach with external and without external points, or in the stealth mode, just to see at which point we are going to be detected, and whether the missiles are going to be effective in shooting us down. I'm not going to be trying to avoid a missile. I will not be deploying any countermeasures. I just want to see what is the effectiveness of the missiles, of the radar-guided missiles from the ground-based radar that apply to the settings that we have chosen. So we will test those, we will record the altitudes, we will record the distances, and then we will analyze the result. I will be testing a number of hypotheses, I believe 6 or 7 different hypotheses, and we're going to be looking at the results, and we're going to be finding the evidence how this basically works. So I'm prepared now. I'm going to be taking off, and I'm going to start the settings. So without further ado, let's get it on. So we're starting a run at 10,000 meters with the radar off, heading toward the target, and with our missiles on the wings. So we register the contact at 31.2 kilometers. We can see the missile was fired at roughly 29.8 kilometer distance, so shortly after being detected. And we have a contact. So now turning the radar on to see how this will affect. Okay, so we have a detection at 30.2 kilometers, and also shortly after we have a missile fired, so at 28.2. So with the radar on, we were able to get a little bit closer to the radar. And we have the missile warning. I'm pretty sure the contact as well. Yep. So dropping the external points now. And heading towards the target with the radar off. So we have detection registered at 20.6 kilometers. So let's see if the missile will lose tracking, since we don't have any external hardpoints. Nope, we pretty much have a missile warning system, or MWS, turned on. And we have a contact. So now we're going to do the same, drop the external hardpoints.
You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
And so we have another detection at 21.2 kilometers. Consequently, the missile was fired at 18.7. And it appears as we would have a contact. Yep, that's confirmed. Okay, now we are switching to the side-on approach at the same altitude. Again, we are using external hardpoints, and this time we have a detection at 30.8, so not a big difference to the head-on approach. Do we have a contact? The missile is still locking and tracking us. We can see it on the left of our screen that it's approaching us, and it just missed. Okay, so it did reach us, but it missed us. Now we're going to try this
Take off and head to the mission waypoint.
With the radar.
You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
So we're going to head to 289 degrees. We have a detection at 30.5 kilometers, so very similar again. And we have missile fired at 28.9, so very, very small margins of differences with and without radar. Do we have the contact now? Yep, so we have a hit. I'm not sure it's because of the radar,
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, so this time we're going to drop the external hardpoints, and let's see how does that perform. So we have a contact at 23.5 kilometers, and the missile fired very shortly after that. Let's see how effective the missile will be. Okay, so it was picked up by the missile warning system. I think that was a miss, so we'll put it down as a miss. I think it did us full on. Okay, so similar now,
before we can launch the cap group.
But with the radar on. Okay, so 23.3 is when we have detection. Missile fired at 22.3. Again, very, very small difference between detection and missile being fired. Okay, we have detection. Okay, that was a similar miss, I think. So that was not a full hit. Okay, we're now switching to 7,500 meters. We're again going towards the target. This time we have detection at 24.6 kilometers. At 22.7 we have missile actually fired. Okay, yeah, we have a hit. So we'll put it down as a yes. Now we're going to do the same with the radar on. Okay, so we have a detection at 30.9 and missile fired at 29.8. Let's see if the missile hits the target. Yep, and we have a contact. So now dropping the hard points.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, this time we were able to get much closer. Okay, this is definitely the closest we've got so far. And at 11.7 we have a detection. And okay, missile fired at 9.5 kilometers. We are directly above it. So I think it should be effective. Let's just wait and see. Yep, it's a hit. So we're going to do the same now with the radar on. Okay, we have a detection at 12.4 and missile fired at 10.4 kilometers. Again, we are directly above it, so I don't think the hard points at this point make any difference because the cross section is from below rather than from the front or the side. And we have a hit. So now we're going to do the same at the same altitude, but we're going to leave.
You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before.
So we're going to leave the same SAM radar on our left. So that will be 32.8 is detection, and a missile fired at 31.9. Okay, we can't see the missile yet, and our TSD is not highlighting the missile just yet. Just so you know, the TSD you can turn on to show everything on your helmet display, which is really neat, and then you can see the missiles and all the other radar targets in your heads-up display on your helmet, as you can see here. So we see that the rocket lost the power, and it simply doesn't have any more juice. Okay, so we have a no.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, now the same just with the radar on. So we have a detection at 33.2 and missile fired at 32 kilometers. So just as a reminder, in the similar conditions at a higher altitude, we were hit both times, so we know that this is the proper rocket range. Okay, we can see it on our heads-up display. But then, as you can see, the missile stopped its boosters, and okay, so it didn't have enough strength to reach to us. Okay, now we're going to drop the hard points. So approaching Sidon at 7,500 meters. Okay, that's interesting. At 24.7, we have a detection. So similar to the other altitude, definitely, but not as good as when we are heading towards the target with external hardpoint. So definitely this side cross section is more detectable. I can tell that straight away. So let's see if the missile will be effective. Okay, this is definitely much better. So the missile didn't even reach us.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, again, external hardpoints are there, but with the radar on. Okay, so 25.3 is the detection. And pretty much at the same time we have missile fired. Let's see if it's going to hit home. Okay, so no again. Okay, so now we are dropping the altitude down to 5,000 meters. Again, heading towards the target, no radar. We have a detection at 30.6 kilometers. And we have missile fired at 28.8. Let's see if it hits home. Okay, that's a yes. We're going to try this again with the radar.
Mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, so 25.6 detection. And missile fired at 23.8. Let's see how effective the missile will be. Yep, okay, that's another hit. So far, I think every time we were approaching straight, directly towards the target, the missiles were 100% effective. Okay, now it's dropped external hardpoints. Let's see how close we can get. So far, the closest has been 11.7, which was at 7,500 meters. So this time it's 8 kilometers. So even better at this altitude. 5.8 is when the missile was fired. Let's see if it hits home. Yep, so we have a hit. And now, again, stealth, but with the radar on.
Head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
So the record so far was 8 kilometers without being detected. Okay, this time we have it at 7.4, so this is the best so far. And at 5.5, yeah, 5.5 we have a missile launch. Is it going to hit us though? So we are now past the target, we've flown over it. So the missile is now basically following us, but we are going 1400 kilometers. So I think we might just outrun it. Yep, you can see it stopped boosting, so yeah, it exploded midair, so we have a no. It's very good. Okay, we're going to switch to the side-on approach at
5,000 meters. You need to
meters.
clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Let's see if the let's see how effective the missiles are at this altitude and this approach. Okay, that's interesting. We have 25.9 kilometers detection and 24.5 is when the missile was fired. So, so a better performance than head-on approach, which is different to what we've had so far. We have a missile and we can see it heading towards us in full force, so I think it's a hit. Yep, it's a hit definitely. So let's now switch the radar on.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
So let's see if it makes any difference, changing the approach. And we have detection at 25.7, so almost identical as without the radar. So, and we have 24.5 is when the missile was fired, so literally identical to the previous attempt. So far what I'm seeing is that the right radar doesn't mean that much. With the ground-based radar, it may be different with the planes. I didn't test that part. And we can see the missile heading to us at full speed, and it's a hit. So now, dropping the external hard points.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, so it's already better than a head-on approach at this particular altitude. Okay, so 18.7, so a much better result. And 17.7 is the missile fired. But let's see if it's going to hit us. So remember, we are going sideways towards the target, so the target is on our, or the SAM is on our, so basically 9 or 10 o'clock. So we are now heading, so the rocket is heading in front of us, trying to get us, so it needs a lot of power and energy. We can see the booster stopped working now, and the missile is now basically just going on its own kinetic energy towards us. I'm not increasing the speed or anything. It just, I feel that the missile is tracking us, but for some reason it stops boosting, and we have no contact this time.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, we're going to do the same, but with the radar now. Okay, again, we expect similar results. Without the radar, we were at 18.7. let's see how far we can get with the radar. Okay, that's slightly better. I can see already. Okay, so that's 15.5 kilometers, and roughly at the same time we have a missile launch, so 15, I'll put it down as 15.3. Okay, so it lost tracking, so we have no contact. So now we're heading at 2,500 meters, again heading directly towards the target. So we have detection at 24.5 and launch at 22.6. So we can already see that the distance at which we are detected is dropping down as we lower our altitude, which is kind of what we all expected. And again, we are heading directly towards the missile, and we have a hit. So 100% record so far in the head-on approach. So we're going to try the same with the radar on. Okay, so that's 25.8. And a missile fired at roughly 24 kilometers, so a very, very similar results with the radar as without the radar. Again, I fully expect to be hit by this missile. Okay, and we have a hit.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint.
So we're dropping the
you need to clear out the long-range air defenses.
And we're heading towards the target without the radar. So let's see, at this altitude we're going to get close to the best performance that we had at 7.4 kilometers, which was at head-on at 5,000. We are certainly getting very close. Okay, so that was 7.7. And we have a launch 5.5 kilometers. Let's see if the rocket will be effective at this altitude. Yep, very much. So we're going to try this with the radar on to see if
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, this time 8.2, so only half a kilometer worse than without the radar, and we have 5.7 kilometers launch detected. Okay, and it's a hit. Okay, so now we're going to do the same at a side-on approach, 2,500 meters. First,
you need to clear out the
with the external high points
before we can
without the radar.
cap group.
Okay, so we have a detection some 4 kilometers worse than a head-on approach. 27.8 is we have a missile detected, but let's see if it hits us. Okay, so we have the missile warning. We can see it on our heads-up display. Okay, it stopped boosting, so this is a good sign for us. And we've outrun it, so we'll put it down as a no. Okay, now with the radar on, same approach.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Note that I'm trying to use always the same heading, roughly the same distances from the radar. There's a small variation how quickly or how well do I do it. So there are small variables there that we need to take into account. Okay, so 28.5 kilometers, pretty much the same as, and we have the missile fired 27.5, so identical results without the radar. So the radar does not seem to make any difference whatsoever. And again, when we have failure to follow, failure to hit, we can see the missile. Okay, now we are switching to
Take off and head to the
side-on
mission
approach.
waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Without the external hardpoints. And no radar. Okay, so roughly 22.6 kilometers is when we have detection, and 22.8 launch of the missile. Again, I don't expect it to hit us. Okay, that's another no.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Okay, we're going to do the same with the radar on. Let's see how that compares. Okay, slightly better than with the radar off. Okay, so 20.8 kilometers is where we have detection, and then 21.2 kilometers as we are going away from the target now, or from the SAM radar. So the missile will be probably struggling to reach us. So definitely a very, very good strategy against missile is to have them following you when you're going at speed, and without any hard points, it will have a really, really hard time tracking you. Okay, so in the final altitude for today is at 500 meters, so very low. We are again heading towards the target without the radar and with the winged missiles attached. So far the best performance we've had was head-on approach at 7,500 meters. That was 24.6. This time it's 27.1, which is bizarre. I was expecting to perform much better at this altitude. We have missile fired at 25 kilometers distance. Is it going to hit? Yeah, I think so. So far, I think we have a 100% record in the head-on approach. We've been hit pretty much every time. Yep, definitely no different this time.
Take off and head to the
Let's see if the radar
you need to clear out the long range
changes this in
before
any
we
way.
can launch the cap group.
So 26.5, I would say a mere half a kilometer distance in favor of radar on, must be noted. And we have had 24.7 kilometers was the missile fired. And again, I expect it to be hit. And we have a contact. So now we're going to switch to the side. Sorry, we're going to drop into the external hard points. We are still heading towards the target. We should do rather well at this altitude. Okay, so that was 4.1, the best so far. And at the same time, we've had a missile fired, and it was effective because we were so close to it. Let's see if the radar makes any change to that.
You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Again, you can see we can get really close without being detected. And 4.1 is again when we had detection and the launch at the same time. And at such a vicinity, it's definitely going to hit us. So we've had the best performance so far, 4.1 kilometers without being detected. So the 500 meters altitude seems to work best. Okay, let's do that on the side approach again. So this will be our final approach, so to speak. So side on, 500 meters, no radar. And we have 26.7. So as you can see, a much worse performance when viewed from the side. And we will see if that will stay true when we drop the hard points off. What's the rocket going to do? Yeah, it definitely looks like it's going to hit us. Bam. Okay. Okay, let's try switching on the radar.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
Amazing. Every time I've been hit so far, I've never been terminally hit, so I didn't check for damage, but the plane was did not lose any performance. Okay, we have nearly identical detection and launch times, 26.6 kilometers and 25.5 respectively, which is basically identical to the attempt without the radar. Okay, at this altitude, I think we should be hit. Yeah, because the missile can deploy all the energy in trying to reach you rather than going higher up. And we have a hit. Okay, now let's drop the hard points and see.
Take off and head to the mission waypoint. You need to clear out the long-range air defenses before we can launch the cap group.
As a comparison, at this altitude we were able to get within 4.1 kilometers without being detected. On the side approach though, it's 16.8. and launch 16.6 basically, so roughly at the same time. What I'm really curious to see if the missile will be able to track us now without the external hardpoints. We know that it has the energy and can hit us at this distance and altitude. So the only variable here is that there are no wing missiles, no external hardpoints, so the plane is in the stealth mode. Okay, we can see that we've already overtaken it and it's exploded midair, so that's a big no. It's as if the missile simply stops trying, probably loses the tracking and then switches off the boosters. Okay, let's see what happens with the radar on. Okay, we have 14.5 kilometers is when we were detected, and immediately after that the missile was fired. But let's see what's going to happen with it. And again, it exploded midair. So, okay, let's get the hook down. The carrier is right there.
Sierra 1-1, call the ball. You're high. Calm left. Lined up. Wave off, you gotta go around. 2-wire. Welcome back.
Okay, let's look at the results. So here we are going to see the full table of everything that we recorded. Basically, we have 4 different categories, and then we have different altitudes and different approaches. I've applied the conditional formatting to the table, so you have the worst result in the vertical column. So the worst result is the red, the best result is the green, and then all the shades in between. So this will allow us to easily look at the table. But I think for the purposes of this analysis, I'm going to split it into 2 tables, and we're going to look at a head-on approach separately and side-on approach separately. Okay, so now that we've split the table, we can start looking for some patterns. Now, in order to analyze the results properly, we need to set ourselves a certain hypothesis. So we need to make an assumption and then test it against the results that we have. So when I looked at these results, I came up with 7 different hypotheses. As I said, nothing surprising about them. They're very much common knowledge, but this time we are testing them against the actual results. So here are the hypotheses. So we have F45 less detectable by radar at lower altitudes, less detectable with your radar switched off, more detectable to radar when it's positioned to your side, less detectable by radar without mounted external hardpoints, missiles less likely to hit the F45 when fired from the side, missiles less likely to keep lock on F45 without external hardpoints, and missiles less likely to keep lock on F45 when the radar is off. So let's start looking at each of these hypotheses and analyze them against the results. Okay, so we're going to stick with these 2 tables for the time being. And the first hypothesis, or H1, is F45A is less detectable by radar at lower altitudes. So when we look at the results in both of these approaches, we can see basically a pattern that at the lower altitudes, we are less detectable whether we approach from side on or head on. But we have a bit of an exception here when it comes to the head on approach at 7.5 and 2,500 meters, and also similar outliers in the side-on approach at 7.5 and 2,500 meters. So these two results, I would say, are definitely sticking out. We don't see those taking place in the uh, in the stealth approach. So without the stealth, there is something going on at the 7.5 and 2.5. This is probably how the game was engineered and how it was designed to recognize the altitudes and the different detection points. So I would say we can definitely conclude here that there is a clear correlation between the altitudes and the distance at which you are detected. With minor exceptions, it is evident that F45A is less detectable at lower altitudes. Okay, so on the H2 hypothesis, the F45A is less detectable with the radar switched off. So let's look at the tables here, but we are comparing the detection distance between sections with the radar and with radar on and radar off. I can say the results are a bit consistent. Sometimes you perform a little bit better with the radar on, sometimes a little bit worse. And the head-on altitude of 7,500 meters suggests the best result with the radar off, but the worst with the radar on. Whilst it's also inconsistent at the same altitude when flying to the side, but the margins are so small, so I would say it's very inconclusive. So basically, the H2 conclusion is the results are inconsistent, and there is little evidence to suggest that having the radar turned on makes F45A more detectable to the ground-based radar. Okay, so we are now moving on to the H3, or the third hypothesis. F45A is more detectable to radar when it's positioned to your side. Again, not much to choose from in terms of the approach to the radar. There is an outlier in the 7,500 meters altitude, so I'm beginning to think that this particular test was maybe corrupted. Other than that, there is some indication that at lower altitudes, the side-on approach is more detectable. This doesn't change. In fact, only becomes more firm when external hardpoints are dropped, and there is a drastic difference in the radar signature between head-on and side-on approach, with head-on approach offering much better results. So I think we can conclude here that F45A is definitely more detectable from the side than it is from the front, especially without missiles and external hardpoints or when in stealth mode. Okay, now on to the fourth hypothesis. Basically, F45A is less detectable by radar without mounted external hardpoints. I think this one's the easiest and by far the most conclusive. Looking at the data at these two tables, we can see that the results are very consistent and conclusive. In all situations, there was a significant improvement in stealth performance when external hardpoints were empty, but this is something that we expected. So the H4 conclusion is F45A is less detectable by radar without mounted external hardpoints. So next we move on to the hypothesis number 5, which is very similar to hypothesis number 6. So I will do them basically together. So whilst carrying out the test, it was really nice to see what happens with the missiles when without deploying any countermeasures or moving the aircraft to try and avoid them. In the head-on table, there is only one instance where the missile failed to hit the aircraft in the head-on approach. So I don't think that was the actual variable. It was just basically a case of missile missing. On the side-on approach, however, the situation is much different. Whereas the results in the side view are mixed and inconclusive, the situation when in stealth mode is very clear. In all cases, when in stealth mode, the missile lose their lock and stop tracking the target. So H5 conclusion is missiles are not less likely to hit F45A when fired from the side unless the plane is in stealth mode, and H6 conclusion is missiles are less likely to keep the lock on F45A without external hardpoints or when the aircraft is in stealth mode. And finally, the last hypothesis, number 7, missiles less likely to keep lock on F45A when the radar is off. So what I wanted to do is test and see if the radar has any correlation with the missiles tracking the aircraft. And I must say, I didn't find any evidence to suggest that. There was slightly more success in avoiding being hit by the missiles when flying side 2 in stealth mode, but this is not consistent or substantial. So the only thing that does make the difference is the stealth mode and when going away from the launch location. So going head towards the mission, the missile is almost a certain hit. So therefore, the H7 conclusion is missiles are not less likely to keep lock on F45 when the radar is off. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this research. There isn't, I can't say that there are surprising results in there, but we were able to go into the little bit of details and see which altitudes, which direction works the best, and how exactly hardpoints affect the radar, the stealth capability. I didn't find too many of these kind of researches on the YouTube. There was one user, Badin Q3. I'll post a link in the description of his video. He also did test some variables if you want to compare, and I will also leave the results for you to download and examine and contest, if you will, because any scientific or empirical research is open to scrutiny. So if you think I did something wrong, if you think that some of the variables or constants skew the results, do let me know. And let me know if you enjoyed this kind of test and if we should do any more testing of some other parts of this or other aircraft's capabilities or distances, effectiveness of the missiles or anything else. I would be happy to do this because I enjoy this kind of thing. So hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, see you.